The reluctant agreement Divya Sharma tucked a wayward strand of hair behind her ear as she organized the final details for Stellar Tech's annual Innovation Showcase. The event was her biggest project since joining the company 8 months ago, and every detail had to be perfect. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message from her boss, requesting her immediate presence in the CEO's office. "Ms. Sharma, Mr. Malhotra will see you now," said the executive assistant with a practiced smile. Divya straightened her simple navy blazer before entering the minimalist office of Vikram Malhotra, CEO of Stellar Tech and notorious perfectionist. At 35, Vikram had built his empire through ruthless efficiency and brilliant innovation, earning both admiration and fear from everyone in the industry. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Divya asked, standing before his imposing glass desk. Vikram looked up from his computer, his expression unreadable behind steel-rimmed glasses. "Your work on the showcase has been adequate." Coming from him, this qualified as high praise. "Thank you." "Sir, that's not why I called you here." Vikram stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Mumbai's skyline. "I have a proposition of a more personal nature." Divya felt her stomach tighten. In her months at Stellar, she'd never heard Vikram use the word personal. "I've received an invitation to my former fiancé's wedding next weekend," he continued, his voice carefully neutral. "Priyanka Kapoor. Perhaps you've heard of her family. The Kapoors of Emerald Hotels? Of course. Our engagement ended unfavorably. The wedding will be attended by every significant business connection in the country." He turned to face her. "I require someone to accompany me. Someone presentable, intelligent, and capable of maintaining a professional facade." Divya blinked, processing his words. "You're asking me to be your date?" "A business arrangement," he corrected sharply. "I've observed your work. You handle people well. You're articulate, unobtrusive, and—" His eyes briefly scanned her appearance. "Adequately presentable." Despite the backhanded compliment, Divya felt a flush creep up her neck. "Why me? Surely there are others." "I don't trust others with my reputation," he interrupted. "And you stand to benefit. A substantial bonus, connections with industry leaders, and my personal recommendation for the promotion you've been working toward." Divya's breath caught. That promotion would mean everything for her sister's medical school tuition. "What exactly would this arrangement entail?" she asked carefully. "1 weekend. A convincing appearance that we've been dating discreetly. Nothing inappropriate," he added, seemingly reading her concerns. Just enough to avoid appearing as the jilted ex-fiancé who couldn't move on. Pride told her to refuse, but practicality whispered otherwise. "And if I decline, then I'll ask someone else," he said simply. "Though few have your combination of qualities." Divya considered her options. A weekend pretending to date her intimidating boss versus the career opportunity of a lifetime. "I'll do it," she finally said. "But I have conditions. This stays professional, and I'm not compromising my integrity or comfort for appearance's sake." Something like surprise flickered across Vikram's face before his mask of indifference returned. "I wouldn't expect otherwise, Ms. Sharma. My assistant will coordinate the details." As Divya left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling she'd just made a deal with the devil, a particularly handsome devil with eyes that, despite their coldness, had momentarily revealed something wounded beneath their surface. What she didn't see was Vikram watching her leave, his rigid posture softening ever so slightly as he wondered if he'd made a mistake involving the one person at Stellar who'd never seemed intimidated by him. Walls of glass, the Kapoor wedding was exactly as opulent as Divya had imagined. Emerald Gardens Hotel's grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements that probably cost more than her annual salary. She smoothed down her midnight blue silk gown, the most expensive thing she'd ever worn, delivered to her apartment yesterday with a note from Vikram's assistant specifying it was appropriate attire for the occasion. "Remember," Vikram murmured as they approached the entrance, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "We've been dating discreetly for 3 months. You were impressed by my vision for ethical tech development. I was drawn to your organizational brilliance, and here I thought it was my charming personality," Divya replied with a hint of sarcasm. Vikram's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. That would be less believable. Before Divya could retort, they were announced and swept into the reception. Immediately, all eyes turned to them. or more specifically to Vikram and whoever this unknown woman was on his arm. Divya felt a momentary panic, but when Vikram's hand subtly tightened around hers, she straightened her shoulders and smiled. "Vikram, we weren't sure you'd come," called a striking woman in her 40s, approaching with a glass of champagne. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Rashmi, auntie," Vikram nodded formally. "This is Divya Sharma, my partner." "Divya, Rashmi Mehta, an old family friend." "Delighted to meet you," Divya said warmly. "What a beautiful celebration." "Indeed, though I'm more interested in how you managed to capture our Vikram's attention. He's been married to his company for so long we thought he'd never find a bride." Rashmi laughed. Divya felt Vikram stiffen beside her. Instinctively, she placed her hand on his arm. "Sometimes the right connections form when we're focused on other things," she said. "Vikram's passion for his work is actually what I admire most about him." Rashmi's eyes widened slightly with approval. "Well, she certainly knows how to answer diplomatically, Vikram. I approve." As the evening progressed, Divya found herself separated from Vikram, drawn into conversations with curious guests. Rather than retreating into awkwardness, she discovered she genuinely enjoyed meeting these people, listening to stories about Vikram's childhood from elderly relatives, discussing social entrepreneurship with tech investors, even charming Priyanka's father with her knowledge of hotel management software. Across the room, Vikram observed her while pretending to listen to a business associate. He'd expected her to be adequate window dressing, not a magnetic presence drawing everyone to her. He watched as she laughed with his former future mother-in-law, a woman who had never approved of him despite his wealth and status. "She's quite something," came a soft voice beside him. Vikram turned to find Priyanka radiant in her bridal finery. "I don't think I've ever seen you look at anyone the way you're looking at her right now." "Congratulations on your marriage," he replied stiffly, ignoring her observation. Priyanka sighed. Still so guarded. "Vic, that's why we could never work. You never let anyone see past those walls of yours." She gestured toward Divya. "But I think she might be getting glimpses." Before he could respond, Priyanka's new husband appeared at her side, and Vikram excused himself. He made his way to where Divya was now chatting animatedly with his cousin. "And that's how we ended up with an elephant in the product launch," Divya was saying, making his usually serious cousin Rohan laugh heartily. "Divya," Vikram interrupted, "there's someone I'd like you to meet." "Oh, you're rescuing her from my boring stories," Rohan grinned. "Too late, Vikram. She already knows about your childhood fear of parrots." Vikram frowned. "I was never afraid of parrots." "The family video suggests otherwise," Divya said with a mischievous smile that, despite himself, Vikram found oddly captivating. As he led her away, Divya whispered, "Your family loves you, you know. They just don't know how to reach you." Something in her simple observation pierced through his practiced composure. "You don't know anything about my family," he said more sharply than intended. Instead of recoiling, Divya met his gaze steadily. "No, but I'm a good listener. And tonight they've been telling me everything." When the slow dance began, Vikram reluctantly led Divya to the floor, maintaining a professional distance as they moved to the music. "You've impressed everyone," he admitted quietly. "Even Priyanka's father asked for your contact information for a potential hotel software upgrade." Divya smiled. "I wasn't trying to network. I just talked to them like people, not connections." Vikram studied her face, genuinely puzzled. "Why, what's the strategy?" "Not everything has a strategy, Vikram," she said softly. "Sometimes people just connect." As the music swelled, Vikram unconsciously drew her closer, one hand pressed against the small of her back. For a brief moment, the practice performance fell away, and something authentic flickered between them, a connection neither had anticipated when they'd entered the ballroom. From across the room, Priyanka watched them with a knowing smile. Whatever game Vikram thought he was playing by bringing this woman, it was clear to everyone watching that the tables had turned. For perhaps the first time in his life, Vikram Malhotra wasn't in control, and his carefully constructed walls of glass were beginning to show the finest of cracks. Ripples of change Monday morning arrived with a jarring return to reality. Divya stepped into Stellar Tech's gleaming headquarters, half expecting something to feel different after the weekend's charade. Instead, everything was painfully normal. The security guard's cheerful greeting, the bustling lobby, the familiar ping of the elevator. What wasn't normal was the flutter in her stomach when she thought about seeing Vikram again. Earth to Divya. Her colleague Rishi waved a hand in front of her face as she stood frozen by the coffee machine. You've been stirring that coffee for a full minute. Hot date this weekend? If only he knew. Just distracted with the Peterson account, she lied, forcing a smile. Speaking of distractions, have you seen this? Rishi held up his phone, displaying a society page with a photo of her and Vikram dancing at the wedding. The caption read, Tech titan Vikram Malhotra debuts mysterious new companion at rival's wedding. Divya nearly spilled her coffee. That's I can explain. No need. Rishi grinned. Office gossip suggests our Ice King finally found someone willing to risk frostbite. Though nobody had you pegged as the type to date the boss. It's not what you think, Divya began, but was interrupted by her phone buzzing with a message from Vikram's assistant. Mr. Malhotra requests your presence in the executive conference room. Immediately. The executive floor was unusually quiet as Divya approached the conference room. Through the glass walls she could see Vikram standing alone, staring at a projection of the same society page Rishi had shown her. You wanted to see me? She asked, stepping inside. Vikram turned, his expression unreadable. Close the door, Divya complied, her heart racing. Was he angry? Embarrassed? The man was impossible to read. I've been fielding calls all morning, he said finally. Business associates, family members, even potential investors, all asking about you. I'm sorry if this has created problems. Problems? Vikram raised an eyebrow. On the contrary, the Kapoor hotel contract we've been pursuing for months was sitting in my inbox this morning. Approved. With a personal note from Sunil Kapoor mentioning how impressed he was with my insightful partner. Divya blinked in surprise. Oh. Furthermore, 3 separate investors who've been hesitant about our expansion have suddenly expressed renewed interest, citing the company's evolving culture as evidenced by my personal life. That's good, Divya ventured, unsure where this was heading. Vikram paced the length of the conference table. Our arrangement has proven unexpectedly beneficial. I propose we extend it. Extend it? Divya echoed, her voice rising slightly. You mean continue pretending to date? Precisely. For business purposes only, of course. He straightened his already immaculate tie. There's the Tech Leadership Summit in Bangalore next month, followed by the Innovation Awards. Your presence would be advantageous. Something in his clinical assessment sparked an unexpected irritation in Divya. I'm not a business strategy, Vikram. I'm a person. His eyes flickered with surprise at her use of his first name. I'm aware of that. I'm simply suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement. Your career would advance considerably. And if I refuse? Vikram paused. The question seemed to genuinely perplex him. Why would you refuse? The benefits are clear. Divya shook her head, amazed at his emotional blindness. Because it's not real. And pretending it is. She stopped, unsure how to articulate the strange discomfort she felt. The weekend had stirred something in her. Watching Vikram with his guard momentarily lowered, seeing glimpses of the man beneath the CEO, pretending it meant nothing felt suddenly dishonest. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Vikram nodded stiffly. Of course. Take the day. As she turned to leave, he added, Divya. She paused at the door. My cousin Rohan called this morning. He asked if you might be interested in having dinner with him. Divya turned back, startled by the odd tension in Vikram's voice. And what did you tell him? That I would relay his interest. Vikram's face was expressionless, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the back of a chair. Though I reminded him about our arrangement. Our fake arrangement. Divya corrected quietly. Something shifted in Vikram's eyes, a flicker of an emotion she couldn't name. Yes, of course. The following weeks brought a strange new dynamic to Stellar Tech. Divya had reluctantly agreed to extend their arrangement, with clear boundaries and a defined timeline. In public, they were the picture of a professional couple, attending events together, photographed at industry functions, even sharing the occasional dinner at restaurants where they might be seen. Behind closed doors, they maintained their professional distance, though Divya couldn't help noticing subtle changes in Vikram. He sought her opinion on projects outside her department. He appeared at company events he would have previously delegated to others. Once she caught him watching her explain a project to interns, an unfamiliar softness in his expression that vanished the moment he realized she'd noticed. For her part, Divya found herself increasingly drawn to the contradiction that was Vikram Malhotra, the ruthless businessman who quietly donated millions to education funds, the cold executive who remembered his assistant's birthday when everyone else forgot, the man who maintained perfect distance except for those rare, unguarded moments when his hand would brush hers and linger just a moment too long. What had begun as a simple pretense was creating ripples neither of them had anticipated, changing the currents between them in ways that couldn't be contained by boardroom walls or business arrangements, and like all ripples, they were steadily growing into waves that threatened to sweep away everything in their path. The breaking point. Crisis began with a single email at 2:17 a.m. Divya's phone chimed with the company's emergency alert, jolting her from sleep. Blinking groggily at the screen, she felt her stomach drop as she read the message. Critical security breach detected. All senior staff report immediately. 30 minutes later, she rushed into Stellar Tech's crisis room to find controlled chaos. Developers hunched over laptops, security personnel spoke urgently into headsets, and at the center of it all stood Vikram, his normally immaculate appearance betrayed by a rumpled shirt and the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "What happened?" Divya asked, joining him at the central console. "Someone breached our primary security protocols," Vikram replied, voice tight with controlled fury. "They're threatening to release our clients' personal data unless we pay 50 million rupees by noon." Divya gasped. "That would destroy customer trust." "I'm aware," he cut her off sharply. Then, noticing the hurt that flashed across her face, he lowered his voice. "I need your organizational skills. We have less than 10 hours to track this breach, secure our systems, and prepare a response that won't tank the company I've spent a decade building." Something in his tone, the subtle vulnerability beneath the command, made Divya straighten her shoulders. "I'll coordinate the team and handle external communications. You focus on the technical response." For the next 8 hours, they worked in perfect synchronicity. Divya orchestrated the crisis team, prioritizing tasks, filtering information to Vikram, and drafting contingency plans for every possible outcome. Vikram led the technical hunt, his brilliant mind dissecting code patterns and tracking digital fingerprints with relentless precision. By 10 a.m., bleary-eyed but determined, they'd traced the attack to a former employee with a grudge. By 11 a.m., they'd patched the security hole and recovered the stolen data. By noon, instead of paying ransom, they were coordinating with cybercrime authorities for an arrest. As the immediate danger passed and team members began filtering out for brief rest periods, Divya found herself alone with Vikram in his office. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the exhaustion etched on his face. "We did it," she said softly, placing a cup of coffee on his desk. Vikram looked up, fatigue momentarily stripping away his usual mask. "You were remarkable today." "Just doing my job." "No," he shook his head. "You did far more than your job description requires. He hesitated, seeming to search for words. "You stood with me when others would have protected themselves first." Divya sank into the chair opposite his desk, suddenly aware of her own exhaustion. "That's what partners do, isn't it? Even fake ones." The attempt at humor fell flat, highlighting the strange limbo they'd been living in for weeks. Something shifted in Vikram's expression. He rose and moved to the window, his back to her. "When I saw that breach alert, do you know who I called first? Before my security team, before the board?" Divya remained silent, her heart inexplicably racing. "You," he continued, his voice uncharacteristically raw. "I called you first, Divya, and I've been asking myself why." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. "Vikram, I've spent my life building walls," he interrupted, still facing the window. "After my parents died, after Priyanka left, it was easier to keep everyone at a distance. Business relationships are predictable, quantifiable." He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. "But there's nothing quantifiable about how I feel when you're in the room." Divya stood, her legs unsteady. "This isn't in our arrangement," she whispered. "I know." His voice was barely audible. "That's the problem." For a moment they stood frozen in the morning light, the weight of unacknowledged feelings pressing between them. Then Vikram's phone rang, the board chairman demanding updates, and the spell broke. Divya stepped back, gathering her professional composure around her like armor. I should check on the communications team. Vikram nodded, his CEO mask sliding back into place as he answered the call. But his eyes followed her as she left, filled with words he couldn't say. The following days brought a strange, fragile tension. They worked side by side, managing the aftermath of the crisis, their professional efficiency masking the emotional earthquake that had struck between them. In meetings, their eyes would meet across the table, a current of unspoken understanding passing between them before they both looked away. The breaking point came during the press conference announcing Stellar Tech's response to the breach. Divya stood at the back of the room while Vikram addressed the media with his usual commanding presence. Stellar Tech has always prioritized security and transparency, he was saying. When faced with this challenge, we chose to fight rather than capitulate. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Malhotra, your reputation has always been one of cold calculation, yet your response to this crisis has been described as surprisingly human-centered. Has something changed? The room fell silent. Vikram's eyes found Divya's across the crowded space. Yes, he said simply. Something has changed. Later that evening, Divya was gathering her things to leave when Vikram appeared in her office doorway. Our arrangement, he said without preamble. I want to end it. The words hit Divya with unexpected force. Despite everything, despite knowing it wasn't real, the pain of hearing him terminate their connection was sharp and immediate. I see, she managed, proud of how steady her voice remained. Of course, the crisis is over. The company's reputation is secured. There's no need to continue the charade. That's not why, Vikram said, stepping into her office and closing the door behind him. Divya looked up, confused. Then why? Vikram ran a hand through his usually perfect hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen before. Because I can't pretend anymore, Divya. Not about this. Not about us. There is no us, she whispered, though the words felt like a lie even as she spoke them. Isn't there? He moved closer, his composure cracking. When you walk into a room, everything changes. When you laugh, I forget whatever I was saying. When you challenge me in meetings, I find myself looking forward to being proven wrong. Divya shook her head, tears threatening. This isn't what we agreed to. No, he acknowledged. It's much more complicated and terrifying than anything I ever planned. He paused, vulnerability naked on his face. I need to know if I'm alone in this. The question hung between them, a bridge or a chasm depending on her answer. Divya felt the weight of months of pretending, of fighting her growing feelings, of trying to convince herself that the glimpses of the real Vikram hadn't captured her heart. You're not alone, she finally whispered. And that's what scares me most. Rewritten Star's 3 weeks of silence stretched between them like an uncrossable desert. After their confession in her office, Divya had asked for space, time to think, to process what it meant to fall for someone she'd only begun to truly know. Vikram had respected her request with the same intensity he approached everything, completely, absolutely, painfully. The company buzzed with speculation about why the CEO and his girlfriend were suddenly never seen together. Divya deflected questions with practiced ease, while Vikram simply refused to acknowledge them at all. They maintained professional interactions in meetings, their voices carefully neutral, their eyes never quite meeting. On a rain-soaked Friday evening, Divya found herself alone in the office, finishing preparations for next week's product launch. Thunder rolled outside as she gathered her belongings, resigned to a soggy dash to the parking garage. You shouldn't be here this late. Vikram's voice from the doorway startled her. He stood with his suit jacket draped over one arm, looking somehow both powerful and uncertain. Just finishing some details for the launch, she replied, her heart racing traitorously. Always so dedicated. His voice held a warmth that made her look up. It's one of the countless things I admire about you. Divya set down her bag, the air between them charged with unspoken words. I thought we were giving each other space. We were. We are. Vikram stepped into her office. But I realized something today that couldn't wait. What's that? I've spent my entire life making calculated decisions. Risk assessments. Cost-benefit analyses. He moved closer, each step deliberate. But nothing about how I feel for you can be calculated or analyzed. And I'm tired of pretending it can. Divya felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Vikram, Please, let me finish. His voice was gentle but urgent. 3 weeks ago, I told you I couldn't pretend anymore. But I've realized I've been pretending my entire life. Pretending I didn't need connection. Pretending success was enough, pretending I wasn't lonely. Rain lashed against the windows as he continued. Until you walked into that ballroom and showed me, what authenticity truly looks like. Divya's breath caught. I was just being myself. Exactly. A smile touched his lips. Yourself is extraordinary, Divya. And these weeks without you have been empty. Thunder crashed outside, momentarily plunging the office into darkness before the backup generators hummed to life. In that brief moment of darkness, Divya felt her remaining hesitation dissolve. I've been thinking about us constantly, she admitted when the lights returned, trying to make sense of how something that began as pretense could feel so real. Perhaps it was always real, Vikram suggested quietly. Perhaps we were just using pretense as a shield. Divya took a step toward him. I was afraid of the power imbalance of office politics, of getting hurt, but mostly, I was afraid of how deeply I've come to care for you. The real you, not the cold CEO everyone else sees. The real me is standing right here, Vikram said, closing the distance between them. Terrified, hopeful, and completely in love with you. The word love hung in the air between them, honest and unhidden. You know, for a brilliant businessman, you've made this unnecessarily complicated, Divya said, a smile finally breaking through. We could have just started with dinner. Vikram laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face. I've never been particularly efficient when it comes to matters of the heart. Then perhaps you need someone to help you with that, Divya replied, reaching for his hand, his fingers intertwined with hers, warm and certain. I already have someone in mind. The kiss that followed wasn't their first. They'd shared brief public displays of affection during their charade, but this kiss held nothing back, had no audience to convince, no pretense to maintain. It was simply them, finally honest with themselves and each other. When they parted, Vikram rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, I'm not easy to love. I'm stubborn, demanding, and I work too much. I'm aware of your flaws, Vikram Malhotra. Divya smiled. I've had a front row seat to them for months. And yet you're still here. And yet I'm still here, she confirmed. Though if we're listing flaws, I should mention I'm stubborn too. And I'll never stop challenging you when I think you're wrong. I'm counting on it, he said, his eyes warm with promise. 6 months later, Stellar Tech celebrated its most successful quarter to date. Industry analysts attributed the company's remarkable growth to its innovative new approach to ethical tech development. A vision championed jointly by CEO Vikram Malhotra and his newly promoted Chief of Strategic Initiatives, Divya Sharma. The society pages that had once speculated about their relationship now documented their public appearances with admiration, noting how the formerly austere CEO now smiled freely, particularly when his partner was speaking. Employees whispered about how the company culture had transformed, how Vikram's legendary coldness had given way to a more balanced leadership style that combined his brilliant strategic mind with a newfound emotional intelligence. What the papers didn't capture were the private moments. Vikram learning to cook Divya's favorite dishes in his previously unused kitchen. Divya teaching him to laugh at himself. The late-night conversations where they shared dreams and fears. The way they balanced each other, her warmth softening his edges, his determination strengthening her resolve. At the annual Tech Leadership Summit, the very event he had once proposed as part of their extended arrangement, Vikram surprised everyone, including Divya, by deviating from his prepared speech. A year ago, he told the assembled industry leaders, I thought success was measured by market share and profit margins. I believed vulnerability was weakness and emotions were inefficient. His eyes found Divya in the audience. I was wrong. The most valuable innovation at Stellar Tech this year wasn't a product or a process. It was the realization that true connection, authentic human connection, is the foundation of everything meaningful we build. Later that evening, as they stood on the hotel balcony beneath a canopy of stars, Divya leaned into Vikram's embrace. Not bad for a cold CEO and his pretend girlfriend, she teased. Vikram smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Nothing pretend about us anymore. No, Divya agreed, turning in his arms to face him. Just real. Complicated, imperfect, and absolutely real. Above them, stars twinkled in patterns neither of them could have predicted a year earlier. Constellations rewritten by chance. Choice and the courage to be authentic in a world that often rewarded pretense. What had begun as a calculated arrangement had transformed into something neither could have planned for. A love story written not in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in the quiet truth of two hearts finally brave enough to be known.